Good evening. We'll call our Planning Commission meeting for April 14th to order. Can we have our roll call?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'll call the roll. Mariah Bishop.
Here.
Ralph Carson.
Here.
Philip Jefferson.
Here.
Jihan Hodges.
Here.
Ben Mills. Sherry Phillips.
Here.
Michael Voiland.
Here.
That's 6 members present.
Thank you. Our invocation, Mr. Voiland.
Yep. No need to bow your heads. Too often, some town residents believe that the town is a mysterious, all-powerful entity, and they label this entity they, T-H-E-Y, they. If you go to some local area social media sites, you may know what I'm talking about. You'll likely see posts from Garnerites that shout out, they need to put a blank in Garner, whether that be a Wegmans or a Whole Foods or a Trader Joe's or an IKEA. These sorts of statements suggest that many town folk frame the town officials as being the they. They imagine that the town council and planning commission actually control not only which businesses or franchises will be located in our town, but also control what the addresses of those businesses will be. Of course, the town has no such powers. Landowners within town boundaries have every right to propose developing their property as they would like to. But unless landowners and developers come forward with a proposal that they believe will be profitable or in some other way advantageous, there's little the planning commission or town council can do to force such interest on the private sector's part. In short, and in reality, a new business will approach the town with a proposal to locate here only when the profit motive tells them to. I'm going on about this only because while this misunderstanding of our role may exist among some of our townspeople, it shouldn't exist among us as commission members. We shouldn't advance a proposal based on what we personally believe would be nice or convenient or exciting or right up the alley of our individual wants or needs. We need to remember that justifying a development should be left to the developer, whereas determining how well a proposed development reflects area plans or character should be what we're all about.
It's very important, really important. Thank you for sharing that with us tonight. It's time to review our meeting minutes. Adopt our agenda. Are there any items on our agenda that need to be added that are not there? If not, do we have a motion to approve our agenda as written?
I'll make a motion to accept the agenda.
Mr. Carson, thank you so much. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Hodges, thank you so much. We have a motion and a second to adopt our agenda.
There's a motion on the floor to adopt the agenda. I'll call the vote. Mariah Bishop.
Yay.
Ralph Carson.
Aye.
Philip Jefferson.
Aye.
Jihan Hodges.
Aye.
Sherry Phillips.
Aye.
Michael Voiland.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes. The agenda is adopted.
Thank you so much. We've adopted our agenda. I hope you've had some time to review our meeting minutes from our March 10th meeting. Are there any changes that need to be made per your review that anyone found? If there are none, is there a motion to approve our meeting minutes from March 10th?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Borland, thank you so much. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Carson and Ms. Phillips.
Whichever one.
Thank you so much. We have a motion and a second.
There's a motion on the floor to approve the minutes. I'll call the vote. Mariah Bishop.
Aye.
Ralph Carson.
Aye.
Philip Jefferson.
Aye.
Jihan Hodges.
Aye.
Sherry Phillips.
Aye.
Michael Voiland.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes. The minutes are approved.
Thank you so much. We have approved our meeting minutes from March 10th. Now our old and new business. We have one item on the agenda this evening, CZ 24007, 5828 Fayetteville Road.
Good evening, Commission. I'll switch hats now. I'm going to be presenting CZ 24007, which is a rezoning for 5828 Fayetteville Road. Our applicant for this is Flores Capital LLC. The owner is Adelpho Flores. This is a Tier 1 conditional district rezoning request to rezone approximately 0.6 of an acre from rural agricultural to light industrial conditional. The site is along US 401 South at the intersection of Fayetteville Road. There's actually a little road called Fayetteville Road next to what we know as Fayetteville Road 401. As a reminder, this is a Tier 1 request, and there's no site-specific master plan. For context, it is currently zoned rural agricultural, which is primarily agricultural and low-density residential. The site is currently vacant. It is on the west side of US Highway 401 South at the intersection with Fayetteville Road, right at the corner, about halfway between Simpkins Road and the George's Landing subdivision. Much of the area is single-family residential, a mix of smaller commercial and industrial uses as well, mostly on small sites, and it does fall within the CHO overlay district, the commercial highway overlay. The site falls outside of our designated activity centers. The nearest activity center is a regional employment center, that red circle that is centered at the Buffalo landfill to the north. And there's also a mixed use activity center, which is the brown circle, a little harder to see. That's at the intersection of where 401 meets Old Stage Road and Farm Road. I did want to put in a slide about our CHO. That was a question that council had kind of questions about from our first to our second part of our public hearing. So you'll find that everything in the CHO applies per UDO, regardless of whether it's written into the conditions. There are prohibited uses in the CHO, none of which the applicant is proposing. There's also a map there that kind of shows where the CHO is. The red, it's primarily along 401, 70, and Garner Road. There are also standards related to development, design, and landscaping within the CHO. As far as development standards, these are just parts of what is in the UDO. There are limits to the outside display or storage of goods. In the CHO, they're limited to 50% frontage if the parking is in the street yard area, or 66% if it's in the side or rear yards. There are design standards, including limits to the maximum building height. They would be limited to 24 feet in height because it does adjoin residential uses. There are avenues for the height to be increased if the setback increases. But you'll see from what they're proposing in their standards as far as buffer, that's not something they're doing. And then landscaping standards, they also go above the general landscape standards of the UDO, and mostly relates to high density or high intensity activities and certain non-residential uses adjoining residential uses, none of which apply in this case, but I did want to point that out. The site also falls within our Swift Creek Land Management Plan, so we are aware of impervious surface limits. The site is designated as a yellow new suburban site, so there's an impervious surface limit of 12%. The applicant, if they chose to retain an inch of rainfall on site, they could go up to 30% impervious. However, you see in their written conditions, they are writing and they're going to stay under the 12%. They're not doing any on-site stormwater capture, so it will be a smaller footprint development. From their written conditions, from our part 1 to part 2 of the public hearing, they limited or they reduced their permitted uses to only 2. You'll see those listed here. They are proposing for permitted uses other office uses not listed, and flex space, other light industrial, manufacturing, warehousing, or transportation uses not listed. So just those 2 uses. They are proposing at least 60% materials that are brick, stone, or decorative scored masonry units. The UDO requires 50%. Number 3, they are proposing a covered awning of 28 square feet and decorative light fixture to be installed at the main entrance, the public-facing entrance of the building, not their bay entrances. They are proposing an opaque screening buffer or hedge at least 22.5 feet wide that will be provided along the north side of the property, which would back up to the parcels that are on Weeks Drive there, where it borders residentially occupied properties. The buffer and hedge shall include a combination of evergreen plantings, earthen berms, and/or solid fences, all designed to exceed the required height of 4 feet, reaching a height of 6 feet. So they're writing that in because they're going to a higher height than is required in the UDO, 6 feet rather than 4. And they are calling for at least a full screening, whether it's opaque landscaping or that fence. Number 5, they have a written condition regarding stormwater, kind of green street solutions. They are proposing a bioswale that's going to modify the drainage pattern, including a channel drain with perforated pipe running from north to south along the west side of the property that will connect to Fayetteville Road and 401. The bioswale shall be excavated to a depth of 2 feet, lined with gravel and covered with soil or stones. I do want to point out all of this bronze brown colored text was changes the applicant made from the first part of our public hearing to the second part, which is what council saw and now you are seeing. And then number 6, they are writing in a condition where they're limiting themselves to that 12% impervious surface. They are counting the building with a square footage of approximately 1,600 square feet included in that, with the building, driveways, parking areas, and other hardscape areas, and they are not going to exceed 12%. So although we don't have a master plan, they have determined that they can fit within that, and they're writing that into their conditions. Staff had 84 properties and occupants within the notification radius. The neighborhood meeting was held this past August 22nd at the Garner Rec Center. There were 8 people in attendance, and you have the full neighborhood meeting packet in your staff report. We were able to evaluate 9 growth framework criteria. You'll see 6 of them were strongly consistent. 1 was modestly split, and there were 2 strongly inconsistent ones. The strongly inconsistent ratings were given to the LI zoning choice because it's otherwise not consistent with the neighborhood's typology destination. And then the industrial or warehouse building type also received that negative rating. However, there overall was strong consistency with the development intensity metrics of the site. For the land use community character consistency, it was largely mixed. There were higher ratings given for the low intensity uses and that it is a small infill redevelopment. They also got high ratings for the consistent size and scale of existing development in the area. As I mentioned, there are some small industrial and commercial uses in the area, but they are also generally small scale. They did get low ratings for a lack of design features or treatments as a destination. That is in our comp plan. Also, a lack of a pedestrian network connection. Staff would like to point out that minimal pedestrian connection along 401 is already a pre-existing condition. The full detail of the consistency review is attached to your staff report. So overall, despite those 2 strong non-supporting scores for growth framework criteria, we do believe you can make an overall finding of consistency. There were some fine tuning from our first to second public hearing that got to a better score for them. There's also marginal support for land use and community character, but with continued input, we can find an overall finding of consistency. As I alluded to before, they did have a public hearing initially February 4th. Council had some concerns over the small single site tier 1 rezoning There were questions of whether tier ones were better suited for large or small scale. Staff believes that tier ones can be used for both small and large scale rezonings. There were also concerns over the land use consistency and what the stated purpose of was for the site. The applicant returned a month later for a second part of our public hearing with some changes. Council voiced their appreciation for the reduction of the number of permitted uses. They did have a question over the impervious surface allowance as a written condition. And there was a question over the maximum building size that the applicant is proposing. We do have a draft consistency statement. It's in your staff report. It's also on the screen. There are, of course, 4 options for a motion that you can consider for this case. The highlighted option does indicate results of staff's analysis. You'll find that in your staff report, and of course, you can make any other motion that you would like. The draft motion to recommend approval will be here on the screen, also in that staff report. Tonight, our next steps would be Planning Commission, you would return your findings of plan consistency and whether you would recommend to approve or deny this to council. And then it would go to council next for their findings of reasonableness and their decision to approve or deny. The applicant is here tonight. They don't have a formal presentation, but they're happy to answer any questions and speak. Staff can answer any questions as well. So I'll open up the floor to commission to ask us any questions. And then if you have questions for the applicant, they're here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Storr. Are there any questions for staff?
I've got a couple questions, I guess. On the application for uses and zoning, the one page, under item 2, they talk about the 60% materials, brick, stone, or decorative scored masonry. But in the public meetings, in 3 applicant responses, the building was all metal. So is the building all metal, or is it falling under?
Well, the architectural standards are for the outside of the building. If the building itself is structurally metal, that would be for the applicant to answer. But they could not have a metal building. It would have to have at least what they're proposing architecturally on the exterior.
Commissioner Mills couldn't be here this evening, and he did ask a couple clarifications. Is there anything in this application that prevents automotive repairs being done at this?
Well, it's not in the permitted uses.
So
No.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in fact, in their original application, they did have vehicle repair as a permitted use. They took that out as a result of council feedback in that first public hearing. So, yes.
And the last question that Commissioner Mills had, this bioswale, is that going to be exempt from the yearly O&M inspections, yearly inspections that have to be done for the biotreatment? Is that something that?
we do those kind of inspections for? I don't.
It's basically a buried structure. So
Right,
I wouldn't think
right.
that would apply, but I just.
Yeah, I don't know if there are. I don't believe so. Aaron, do you know if those kind of things are inspected annually as SCMs are?
I'm not 100% sure if they are or not. I would think that they wouldn't be, because it's not a stormwater control measure that would have that's a requirement. They are proffering this as a condition. There also would not be any maintenance easements or anything of that nature. Typically, those stormwater control measures have some sort of maintenance easement to them for access if the town or any other agency would need to step in. But because this is being voluntarily added as a commitment. I don't believe. I can certainly check for, just to verify with our stormwater control reviewer for the town, but I don't believe so.
Yeah, that's a good question. It probably because it's not a required SCM, it wouldn't fall into the typical inspection guidelines, but this is something that they are offering. But yeah, good question. We could probably find a little bit better answer for that. It's not going to be tonight, but keep in mind this is something they're proposing that is not required at least.
I got one more question for the applicant. And it goes to consistency or compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. I mean, you're kind of adjacent to single-family homes. And I know there's other commercial properties along there, but I guess I'm having a little bit of a issue with having another warehouse adjacent to single-family homes where it's rural now. We're trying to change it to light industrial. If that's really the best use for this property, as it's not really compatible with the neighbors.
I'll answer that first. I will point out, as you are right, behind it there are residential uses that are there. Across the street, on the other side of Fayetteville Road, there is also a light industrial building, and right next to it is also RA zone. So we already have a little bit of that in the area that you could say is inconsistent next to each other, but we already have light industrial touching residential in that area, and we're probably trending to not have many more single family residential lots in that 401 corridor, but that's just kind of where the development pattern is taking us there. But that's a good observation, Mr. Carson.
Do you have
Would
any
the
comment
applicant like
on
to
that,
speak?
or-
Yeah, to be completely honest. So yeah, the main reason is we're trying to.
Let me stop first. Can you state your name and your address?
Yeah,
for our
sorry.
record?
So
I'm
my name
sorry,
is
and your
my
record.
name is Esteban Rengifo. My uncle actually is Adelfo Flores, but he's not able to speak better English than I am, so I'm helping with his property. Sorry. So yeah,
And
like-
address location.
the address is 577 Corbett Road, Clayton.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sorry. But yeah, like Thomas said, we're trying to replicate what's across of us. It's really a small building, mainly because my uncle owns a lot of supermarkets and restaurants right here in Garner in Raleigh too. So he wants to have it for like a storage of small goods. That's why the building is 16 square footage, and we don't plan to go above the 12% impervious as well. So he's trying to make sure he uses the land that he owns, and the best way to do it was sitting with planning commission and talking through and tuning up all these conditions and all the land uses and all that. So we've been playing along with it to make sure we don't overstep the residential size that we are around, but we also have enough so we can make sure we use it as we wanted to use it. So
Okay, I understand what your plan is. I guess, again, we're taking a rural zoning and making it light industrial immediately adjacent to single-family homes. And if I was in those single-family homes and I knew that was rural, that kind of limits what could be built there. Now, all of a sudden, we're encroaching into that area with light industrial, even though it's further south and it's across the street. I just have a concern about that, but I'll let somebody else speak on that. And
Well, related to that, I don't see where LI light industrial can creep anywhere away from the site. What is the parcel immediately to the west of this site? I don't see a house on it, correct?
It's vacant.
It's vacant.
Yeah, the on the same side of Fayetteville Road, right next to it. Correct. Yes, it's vacant.
Well, it just leads me to believe that there's some buffering there. And as you said, there's light industrial across the street and to the south. So I'm not as concerned as Ralph might be.
Ms. Phillips.
What exactly are you gonna put in this warehouse?
Goods for the supermarket, or maybe an equipment that we don't have placed yet in the supermarket, just to move it from the site to the supermarket. But it's mostly for storage of goods. That's why the warehousing comes in.
Because I noticed on the summary of discussion from the neighborhood meeting, it says, what can you say about the project and trucks will enter the street? Will there be a lot of trucks going in and out of the area, or?
No, they
So
should.
how do you plan on getting these, whatever it is that you're gonna be putting in there? I mean, how do you plan on getting those items to the warehouse?
On a truck, because they're not big items.
They're not?
They're boxes, pretty much.
So you're gonna, okay.
Yeah.
So I'm my concern is just, about the
A lot of
the street.
movement of
Yeah, the
trucks and
street,
everything.
right,
Yeah,
exactly.
no, we had the same concern with the public hearing with the neighborhoods meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't plan to have many trucks coming in and out day or night. It's mostly like moving stuff from the supermarket, because everything gets dropped at the supermarket. But since we don't have the space in there, we might move them from the supermarket to the warehouse. But there shouldn't be trucks coming in and out all the time to the site. That's mostly for storing the goods of the other businesses that my uncle's has.
Thank you.
And I wanted to clarify, so I feel like there might be two different, like when we're discussing trucks, I think we're maybe thinking like 18-wheelers, and we were thinking
Yeah, I'm
probably
talking
like
about-
more like personally owned vehicles,
Yes.
like pickup
Okay.
trucks.
Yes.
So that's a
Yeah.
big difference than a huge warehouse that has,
Right.
18-wheelers pulling in and out like an Amazon or something, opposed
Yeah.
to having overstock and filling up the back of a.
Yeah, it wouldn't be 18-wheelers.
Yeah.
It's more
Okay.
personal truck
Okay.
uses.
Or potentially box trucks, just a box truck.
Yeah.
Yeah, potentially.
But this isn't going to be like a loading
No,
zone or
loading
anything
deck
like
or
that.
anything like that, no.
Ms. Bishop.
Yeah, I guess I have a few of the same concerns that were kind of echoed by Ralph about the land use consistency. And I get that there's, a buffer and that there's industrial across the street. But yeah, my biggest concern is that it is near, homes. And I get that in the past it's, been industrial, but we kind of have to, keep looking forward. And same with the pedestrian connection. I think Garner really needs more pedestrian connections. Is there any way that you could add a pedestrian connection? And I get that there's not, in the past, there hasn't really been. But in order to keep the town growing and moving, I think we need to move towards that direction of having pedestrian connections like a sidewalk or something.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you about it because I know the 401 is expanding.
Yeah, from at least along the 401 side, we would probably not have them add that because there would be, if there are ever sidewalks there, it would be probably a DOT project where they'd be either widening or adding curb and gutter or sidewalks. But if, there were sidewalks along 401, if the applicant were to, agree to in the future, perhaps just have an internal connection, I think that's probably more what you're leaning towards. But if they were just to put a piece along 401, it would unfortunately not connect to anything at this time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of my other questions were answered with the rest of the group. So.
Ms. Hodges, do you have any?
No, I'm just looking at the Google Street View, so it just looks like, it's not even the closest commercial property to, there's several commercial properties already there between where your land's located and the neighborhood. So it's not even turned, like, I guess, not the last piece of property adjacent, because it looks like
Yeah.
across the street is the crown flooring. There's a place on the other side that has metal fencing and a brick building and a lot of trucks, look like U-Haul trucks, and the insulating ink, looks like. So there's several already.
Yeah, there's certainly a
Yeah.
mix of uses in the area. These are just not large sites.
Yeah.
There was a question that council had at the first public hearing if this was going to lead towards additional properties being acquired and then the zoning applying. Well, if you were doing a combining of properties, you would have to come for a combined rezoning. All these properties would have different rezoning. It would be very unlikely that they'd all have the same permitted uses and could just build something large scale. So, this as a 6/10 of an acre site, we're evaluating it just as this, but we can compare it to places in the area. So that's for you guys to consider.
Is there anything in the pipeline that you're aware of that would affect those adjacent rural agricultural zoning that somebody else might be looking to do
No,
light industrial?
and as we get to Weeks and Garner Glen and up to Simpkins, that's not ETJ, it's not town limits. The applicant has told us, they can tell you that their goal is to connect to services and annex. This is currently in ETJ, but no, we haven't seen anything in that area that's coming, Aaron. No. I think if you ever see a large scale thing, it would probably be the Speedway, long way down the road, but there's just not large sites there.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to add that I did hear back from our stormwater administrator, and she did confirm that the bioswale would be considered a stormwater control measure, and it would require a O&M agreement, operation and maintenance agreement, and that they soon will be considered a primary stormwater control measure, similar to a wet pond and stormwater wetlands.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Clarification. I think my question maybe aligns with Ms. Phillips, and I think when she was also asking about access to the site, I'm assuming this might be, and well, I'm not sure which question to me. Is access coming from Fayetteville Road on the west side of 401, or is access to the site from 401? Because that's a really big, that's a different.
Their access would be from Fayetteville Road, the
extension.
The cul-de-sac, rather than the highway itself.
The highway, okay.
Yes.
Which in some ways is probably, probably a better access point than actually coming off of 401. Okay.
Are there any hour restrictions on when this site could be accessed? Like, is it going to be during the day hours, 7 a.m., 7 p.m.? Is it going to be into the evening when you may have deliveries coming in and being stored there, or?
Not really. The use of the location will be mainly office hours. Mainly because we have the other offices uses not listed. So I might play into part. Maybe if my uncle decides, well, I don't want to use it as a storing goods, then I want to rent it and put an office administration in there. Then it will be on these office hours. But from our side, from our uncle's purpose, it's only office hours. He doesn't do anything at night. He's more a family guy, so he stays at home really after 5. So.
I don't think I really have any other major questions besides the fact, we've already discussed the material. You've already written that you are in alignment with an exterior that is brick and to, link to some degree with the style of the scale of the neighborhood. I think that's what one more of the issues may be. We're going to questions about the kind of character of
Yeah.
this. I kind of agree with you, Mr. Boylan. The site already has light industrial. This is on the overlay side of the highway. If this was an inner lot, I would have more questions about it. There's already light industrial and CMX on the southern side, and it's a highway side. So it seems, more of a street frontage to me. If there was no industrial there at all, this would be a bigger question for me, I think. But-
I feel more comfortable in it being a storage building, kind of transitioning from heavier light industrial to the south to maybe acting as a buffer to the homes, but
Yeah, I mean, I would note it from the uses they're proposing. They're limiting themselves to just those two, and the size of the site, and they're 12% impervious. That they would just not be able to effectively have a large building there. So that without a master plan, without seeing the site layout. We have an image of the scale of the development, at least. So that's something that you can consider when you're thinking about this site.
But I appreciate the applicant narrowing down his permitted uses. That gives me a little more comfort in tailoring that to that site.
I would note that the applicant was working directly with staff. They did not use a land use lawyer, so they have been very receptive to us and council, and I'm sure you as well, just for input, since they were doing this essentially on their own, but they wanted to do things as they're supposed to. Missing something?
Always. I'm looking at the notes from the town meeting, and from the residents that attended. I mean, the questions weren't questions that were, "I don't want you to build here" type of question. They were just, "What is it going to be? What's the size of it? How tall is it going to be?" And so.
Yeah, I'm not picking up any controversy in
Right.
all of those notes. I'm just not.
Yeah.
Right, and that's,
And
and we don't have any mandates here. So that helps me to see that perhaps the neighbors are not as majorly concerned about that, considering that there are other uses that are light industrial.
And may I add, the use of the bios well that we're implementing is because the neighbor on the north side of the property is having issues with the irrigation system on his property as well. So since we're doing the rezoning and we're planning going back and forth tuning all the proposal, we installed that bios well so it helps and benefits his property so it doesn't get all muddy because there's a lot of stormwater trapped on it. So that's why we put that as our proposed condition too.
Well, thank you for thinking about the neighbors and being a good neighbor in that. I think that's a really important thing to perhaps consider in this. Are there any other questions for staff or for the applicant at this time? Okay, well, this is the time that I ask if there is anyone that would like to speak in favor or against the application that is here tonight. And seeing none, do we have a motion so that we can discuss the next step?
I'll do that.
Mr. Borland.
I move that the Planning Commission accept the consistency statement drafted herein as our own written recommendation regarding the consistency of the request with the town's adopted land use plans and recommend approval of case number CZ 24007 to the town council.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Hodges. We have a motion and a second, so before we do a vote, is there any other discussion on this item? We have no discussion, so we can,
All right, there's a motion on the floor to find the proposal consistent and recommend approval. And I will call the vote. Mariah Bishop,
Aye.
Ralph Carson,
Aye.
Philip Jefferson,
aye.
Jihan Hodges,
Aye.
Sherry Phillips,
Aye.
Michael Voyland.
Aye.
That's 6 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you so much. We passed our motion. I'd like to thank you all for thinking about something that would not overrun that neighborhood, of something that would be large and off-putting for the neighbors, and trying to fit in at least with a size that is reasonable within a kind of an overlay that makes sense. So thank you for that.
No, thank you, planning. It's really been a really nice journey with planning and tuning all these just to see how everything works and understanding how every project comes up to life. So it's been a pleasure, really. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so we are at action reports now. Report from the planning director. Do we have any planning director?
No, Jeff is taking a wellness day, and so I don't have anything to report on his behalf.
Okay, well, thank you. Any reports from planning commission? Mr. Carson, I know, has a report for housing, and Mr. Voiland next.
Just to update everybody on the affordable housing work that we've been doing. Our last meeting as that task force was in January. Town council continued their discussion on the task force recommendations at their February planning retreat. We are working with the Triangle Community Coalition to curate a panel of their membership to meet with town representatives to discuss the report and council's recommendations. TCC is a land use and development advocacy group whose mission is to influence land use policy that encourages a balance among economic growth, development, the environment, and community needs while advocating for private property rights. The task before us is focused on getting feedback from traditional developers of market rate housing and their input on the recommendation of getting their participation in meeting the town's affordable housing goals. So the town manager and council has asked Councilor Vance, Councilor Dellinger, myself, and Ms. Cardenas to participate in this discussion with the TCC coming up in May. And so it's kind of a follow-up to the task force and kind of going with the council's work coming out of the February planning retreat. So still in process, still working with the community to see what can be done there.
That's really great to hear. It's great to hear that that has not just ended just because the task force meeting schedule or agenda has ended, but there is moving into the next step with our kind of larger.
I'd like to thank all the town staff that's been working on that. Some of the folks here and Miss Joseph and
Thank you.
This has been a project that has been probably years in getting to where it's at now, as far as being an issue, and now we're trying to address it. And as the staff's put a lot of work into this, so just commending them for all of their hard work.
I agree. Thank
And
you.
legal.
It's very much appreciated. We've been most of our cases that come up that have residential, we ask that same question. Like someone from the commission asks that question: how much is this house? How much are the houses around it? How much is going to be affordable for our Garner residents to remain here? Not just that we want, people to move here, but we want people that live here to be able to stay here and not to be pushed out somewhere further.
And just to give some feedback on some data that we had, Garner is, as a percentage of population of Wake County and what Wake County's goals are for affordable housing, the town of Garner is way ahead of our percentage based on population. And that's without any regulation or statute. These are developers that are coming to the planning department and in discussion with them and council members voluntarily bringing in the affordable housing component. So I commend the staff for directing that in those discussions, and hopefully that'll continue, and we'll nail down some more perhaps concrete items to look at.
Even better to hear. Garner forward, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Boylan.
Yeah. There's a pad at Bojangles. 2.5 years later, there's a pad, and it looks like they're working at all due speed now. Do we happen to know whether there will be a traffic light at Evolve in Benson?
No, there will not be.
Don't know. Oh, there won't be, or we don't know?
I don't believe there's one proposed right now.
Okay. It's going to be fun.
Well, I guess once we see what happens with.
I will say there's still in discussions with DOT
Yeah.
about driveway permits out there. So
Yeah, okay. I brought this other topic up before. Now that they've removed all of the construction trailers and other stuff for the VA building at that sharp corner on the southwest corner angle of Rand and Benson, that looks like it's a half acre. And I'm just curious whether there's some use in mind for that, or will that be taken up by when they do redo Rand, Benson, and the stretch leading down to the Swift Creek Bridge? Do we know?
There's no proposals in. It does have existing zoning that is different, I believe, on that corner versus the rest of the site. It's just base CMX, not CMX conditional, but it's a site somebody could put in a proposal at some point.
It is
small, though.
If it's a half acre, it's a half acre. I don't know what could be done with it, but it stands out more and more as they remove material and other stuff that had to do with the building of the VA. It's there, and cars are starting to use it as a cut through to make the right onto Benson. So, for what that's worth.
That's something we need to perhaps just kind of keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Sure that we're forcing.
That's all I have.
Anyone else? Planning Commission, any reports or comments? Okay. Well, I have none either. So that being said, I will call our meeting adjourned.